everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you've never been here before. Hey. So in today's video, we're going to be covering the case of JonBenet Ramsey. I know this case is like really popular, so I'm sure a lot of people have seen it already, but there's also a lot of people who haven't seen the case, and besides, I've never told it before, so why not? And also, there's new information that came out in regards to this case, because this year will actually be the 25th anniversary, and it also happened around Christmas time, so I figured it would be the perfect time to actually cover this case. So if you want to know more about JonBenet Ramsey, then keep on watching. Patsy Ramsey made a 911 call to the Colorado Police Department where she reported her daughter missing, and a ransom note requesting a ridiculous amount of money was left behind. So a little bit of a backstory. So Patsy and John Ramsey lived in Boulder, Colorado. They had two children at the time, 9-year-old Buke Hamilton. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. I think it's Brooke or Butte. It might be Brooke. And 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey. So JonBenet, her name is actually a mixture of her parents' name. So her father's name is JonBenet, and her mother Patsy name is Patricia. So her name is JonBenet Patricia. John was a very successful businessman. He had a computer software company, and Patricia, on the other hand, was a former beauty queen, Miss Virginia 1977 to be exact. John and Patricia met in Atlanta, but then they moved to Colorado for John's company. So while he was working, Patsy was a homemaker, and she loved her job very, very much. Like, she enjoyed being a stay-at-home mom. Like, around the holidays, around this time of the year, she really enjoyed decorating the house. Like, she just loved all of it very, very much. So John and Patsy's youngest daughter, JonBenet, she was born on August 6, 1990. So Patsy was a former beauty queen. So as you can imagine, her only daughter, she would want her daughter to get into the whole pageant world. So by the time JonBenet was 4 years old, she was already competing. She was literally full-blown into the whole pageant life, and she was already competing. And by the time she was 6 years old, she had already won titles like America's Miss Royale, Little Miss Colorado, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. She was just very talented and very stunning. So aside from being a pageant queen, JonBenet also had a normal life, as you can imagine. Why wouldn't she? It was Christmas night, 1996. JonBenet's parents took her to a party, a Christmas holiday party that they went to, that they usually go to this party. JonBenet fell asleep in the car on her way home, and once she got home, her dad brought her upstairs, and then her mom took over from there and did, you know, the rest of the nighttime routine that they usually do before she go to bed. So the next morning, Patsy woke up at about 5:30 a.m. And when she woke up, she noticed that there was a letter stuck on the stairwell. So when she picked up the letter was a 2.5 page, almost 3 pages, ransom note. The letter basically says that we have your daughter, and they were demanding $180,000 and instructed for them not to call the police or else. So after seeing that letter, Patsy literally freaked out, and she ran back upstairs to go check the room, to go see what was happening. So when she went inside her room, JonBenet was not inside of her room. So she called her husband John, and she started freaking out, and she completely disregarded the letter and went ahead and called the police to tell the police that her daughter is missing. The police came right away within minutes, and they started looking around the house, basically questioning John and Patsy to see, you know, what happened. And they started looking around the house to see if there were any signs of forced entry. Also, Patsy kind of freaked out, so Patsy called family members, friends, to tell them that JonBenet had went missing. So now her family members and her friends, they all came over as well for support and to help out however they could. So the police, they looked around, they took the statement, searched the entire house, and there was no signs of JonBenet. They didn't find her. They also didn't really find anything that showed that there was any forced entry or anything suspicious. After a couple hours of looking around, searching, investigating, they did decide to leave. However, they did left behind one detective. Her name was Linda Arndt. I think that's how you say her name. Oh my God, I'm so not good with names. That way, whenever they call, because the person that left the ransom note said that they will be contacting them at 10 a.m. and they should have the $180,000 available so they can get their child back. So the detectives stayed behind so they can analyze the call. Whenever the call come in, 10 a.m. came around and there were no calls. Also, while the detective was there looking around, the detective noticed that this letter that was left, the ransom note, was actually being passed around by all the friends and the family, all the visitors that were in the house. And at this point, they can't really use that letter to scrap any fingerprints that were supposed to be on the letter because now it's been touched by so many people. So after 10 a.m. comes around and they didn't get the call, the detective then asked John to look around some more, just like look around the house some more, just to like look around just to see if there's anything that's out of sort, because obviously in the morning emotions were running high, so you probably overlooked a few things. So John actually went down to the basement in a very, very dark room, somewhere where police had not searched prior. Just like a very dark area. I don't know if the police knew about that area or it was just like a hidden, secluded area in the basement. But nonetheless, he went down to the basement. And then he decided to turn on the light and look in this little dark room in the basement. So once John opened up the door and turned on the light, he noticed that there was a blanket on the floor. And then once he picked up the blanket and looked under the blanket, he realized that JonBenet was on the floor under that blanket, but she was unresponsive. Her hands were tied above her head and there was a duct tape covering her mouth. So as you can imagine, Patsy is literally on the floor and she's hysterical. So now the detective that was at the house decided to call for backup so they can send backup. So now they're no longer investigating a missing person. Now it's a murder investigation. So the police department, they actually made a lot of mistakes during this investigation because first of all, when they were investigating, when she was missing, they allow all Patsy's friends and family to come inside the house. So at this point, the scene is contaminated because you have everybody in and out of the house. And then another big mistake that happened is that they actually allowed John to move the body. So John picked up JonBenet from downstairs in the basement and actually bring her upstairs and lay her out on the living room floor. And also some of Patsy's house guests, they literally cleaned the house. Like, you know how you go to people's house and you want to do their dishes, you want to sweep the floor, you just want to, you know, help clean up. And in that time, they just, I guess, didn't know what else to do. So they started offering to clean the home. So this means that they could have cleaned any evidence of the person who did this to JonBenet. So later, an autopsy revealed that JonBenet was killed by strangulation and she was also hit very, very hard in the head. So at first she was hit in the head and she was passed out, then she wasn't dead, and then afterwards she was strangled. It didn't really take long for the suspicions to fall on John and Patsy because obviously JonBenet's body was found in the house, and also John and Patsy, they decided to lawyer up right away, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You should always get a lawyer even if you're guilty. So JonBenet was actually strangled with a garrote. I think that's how you say it. So a garrote is something, or a garrote. A garrote is something that you use to basically tighten a rope if you're strangling somebody. I know it's pretty graphic because it's a little kid, like I can't even. Well, basically it's something that you use to strangle someone. So the garrote tightens the rope, basically. And that garrote that they used was actually made out of one of Patsy's paintbrush. And also the ransom note that was left, the paper that the ransom note was written on was torn out of a notebook that was at the house, and the pen that was used to write the ransom note was found at the house as well. And as I said earlier before, page 1, I don't know if I said this, maybe I did, but yeah, a pre-copy of page 1 of the ransom note was actually found in their kitchen garbage. So the ransom note that they found was actually a second copy. So it looked like the person that was writing the note was having a really hard time, so they decided to scrap the first copy. And also another thing that was very, very suspicious about this ransom note is that the ransom note, they asked for a specific amount, a very specific amount, and the amount was $118,000. And that was actually the amount that John received from his job for his Christmas bonus that year. While interviewing like a few members that, a few members from John's job or coworkers or whatever, they said that only a very, very few people knew that specific amount, because obviously when you work with a company, they just don't really share how much money, to the rest of the coworkers. So only a few people would have known that dollar amount. The news broke about JonBenet Ramsey's murder, and as you can imagine, a child beauty queen was murdered on Christmas. So it literally went crazy. I mean, it was getting 24-hour coverage, like literally all day, every day, because the killer could possibly still be on the loose. No one is arrested. So, everybody wants to know what's happening, and everybody wants to solve this puzzle, and everyone wants to be a part of it. And, and as I said, JonBenet was very, very beautiful. So I also think that because of that, people were also very, very intrigued. So since this was on the news all day, every day, John and Patsy actually received a lot of backlash and criticism for the way JonBenet looked. They just felt like it was very inappropriate. Even though it was for the pageant, they felt like it was just very inappropriate. They felt like she dressed inappropriately for a kid, and the makeup that she was wearing. So people felt like John and Patsy were exploiting their daughter, and this will leave her vulnerable to weird, creepy men. I mean, people are weird and creepy. So I do understand that to an extent. So the police suspect that one of the family member did this. At first, they were thinking that there was an issue where JonBenet had wet the bed, because she did have a little bit of a problem with bedwetting. And they thought that perhaps JonBenet had woke up that night because she wet the bed, and then Patsy flipped out and accidentally hit her, thought she killed her, and then, they decided to strangle her. And then they came up with this elaborate scheme of how, somebody kidnapped our daughter, and then trying to use that as a cover-up. As I said before, her autopsy results show that she was hit in the head really, really hard, which actually caused her to pass out. And then 2 hours later, she was strangled. So they think that in between those 2 hours where they thought she was dead, this is when they came up with the whole lie. So a grand jury decided that they didn't have enough evidence to convict the family member, because they just didn't. And at that time, they basically weren't equipped, like the police department, they weren't equipped to solve that type of case. They decided that they didn't have enough evidence to convict Patsy nor John. So JonBenet was buried in Atlanta, Georgia. The family, since that's where they were from, they actually had their burial plot there. And then the next day, John and Patsy did an interview. I mean, how could they? They did an interview the very next day, offering a $100,000 reward for anybody who had information. I mean, they might as well have paid themselves that money, because they clearly know more than they're saying. So fast forward to 2008, when DNA became a little bit more advanced. So they actually did DNA testing again, and they found that there was an unknown male's DNA on JonBenet's pajamas. So the Ramsey family, they were officially cleared from the case, and people didn't thought they had anything to do with it anymore. However, 2 years later, it actually came out that that unknown DNA could have been from a compilation of DNAs, basically, because so many people were at the crime scene, so many people were touching stuff. So because of that, it could have, all the DNA combined together could have just came back inconclusive, so they can't use that DNA sample anymore. Patsy Ramsey actually passed away from ovarian cancer, and she was buried in Atlanta, Georgia, right next to JonBenet. There were many theories that came about in regards to this case because no one knew who did it, even though we all know who did it, but we can't really say who did it. So there was a theory that there was a sex offender. His name was Gary Oliver. He had been released from prison in 1996, and this sex offender literally lived about a few blocks away from them. And in their area alone, they had like a total of 46 sex offenders living in that area. When they did a DNA test of his DNA and all the DNAs that they found at the scene, none of them were consistent with his DNA. So he was ruled out of it. So one of the craziest theories was that JonBenet's brother, Brooke, remember him? At the time, he was only 9 years old. So they felt like he did it because there were pineapple that was found in JonBenet's stomach that were undigested. So when they asked John and Patsy if they gave her pineapples before bed, they said they didn't, because remember, she fell asleep in the car on her way home, so she didn't have pineapples before bed. So they felt like maybe Brooke was downstairs having pineapple, and then John came down, she woke up and she came down and she had some of the pineapples, and maybe he hit her hard accidentally, you know, don't touch my pineapples. Perhaps hit her with something heavy, perhaps like a flashlight or something like that, and then she passed out. And then her parents thought she was dead and tried to cover it up for him. Also, they did say that it was very weird that he was in the room the entire time. Like the whole time when the murder happened and the whole investigation was going on, he was in the room. He didn't come out not one time, which I don't think is very, very suspicious, because if I was in that situation, knowing me as a kid, how anxious I used to be, I would have been so scared. Like I definitely would have been in my room. So that's not that weird, but that was a theory. However, this theory did not end well. So the documentary that aired, when they mentioned this theory, it actually aired on CBS. So Brooke Ramsey sued CBS for $750 million for defamation. So that did not end well. And they eventually came to a settlement. So Brooke went on and he lived his life normally, got married, and his dad, John, he actually recently got married this year, rather. He got remarried and settled down in Michigan. He's 77 years old. And he's still doing interviews and saying that he hoped that they find the killer. Like, I really hope someday his conscience will just let him say what he knows, because I just know that he knows something. So it's been about 25 years since this murder took place, and they're literally not anywhere closer to finding out who committed this murder. But they're still looking for answers. The case is still very much open, and they're hoping that with the development in DNA that we have nowadays, because obviously it's a lot better than what we had in the 90s. So they're hoping that they're able to get some sort of answers. I'm not sure for who, because I'm sure the family already know what it is. So I don't think it's even for the family. I just think this one is just to know what exactly happened. So it is so crazy, because I just feel like when I looked into this case, I was just thinking like, there's no, like, obviously I knew about this case before because it was very popular and I heard about it, but I've never really looked into it. And I'm just very shocked, because I feel like it's just almost insulting to everyone's intelligence, let alone the people who are investigating this case. And also there was a rumor that the Ramseys, they actually paid off authorities to turn a blind eye to some things, and this is why they were able to get off. And obviously we know that rich people, they do this all the time. They pay money for things to go away, because with all the evidence, it just does not make sense. I don't know why they're trying to push the narrative that they don't know what happened. Because first of all, if someone leaves a ransom note saying that they took a child, you're not going to go find this child in the basement. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, it doesn't make sense. And this ransom note is 2.5 pages. Like, who is writing 2.5 pages? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And also, when authorities looked into the ransom note, they actually found out that most of it came from movies. Like, they basically took some parts out of movies to put into the notes. But that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, or if you made it this far. And I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.